Okay, you might typically know me as a person who uses vintage analog keyboard-based instruments, and because of this YouTube channel, who would blame you? However, I am a person who really enjoys interesting musical instruments, irrespective of those things, and so I've done a number of forays into different types of instruments, like the Therevox instruments, the Continuum, stylophone. Anyway, this is going to be one of those. I was at Moogfest 2018, operating the Buchla booth, and next to me was Landscape. And I got to talking to Eric because I was looking at his offerings, and this was one, and people seemed to be really into it. I kept watching people come up to it, and because Moogfest is headphones only, people put on headphones, and then they'd start massaging this thing and then being very excited. So I was really curious, even though it's kind of outside of what I typically do. So I put the headphones on, and I started touching the thing. And I have to say, I expected it to be kind of a novelty noisemaker, but within moments, I found out that it's an incredibly intuitive and weirdly expressive sound generating device. And it didn't take me long to sort of fall into it. I really wanted to find all of the sounds in it and experience what it could do. And I realized, there's so much to it and it's constantly evolving, and well, you'll understand. In any case, I was immediately taken with the thing, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to buy one of these. And then we got to talking about the possibility of me demonstrating it. So here we are. Okay, so you are probably asking, if you don't know, what is this thing and what does it do? What is it doing? And I've even had a couple of people say, hey, Mark, I can't wait to see you explain what this is and what it's doing. And it's true. I'm more used to typical architecture than what this is. I'm more used to procedural, functional, linear devices as opposed to this intuitive, unpredictable, magical device. So we'll see how far I can get with this. The Landscape stereo field. You can see it as this box. It has 2 inputs on the back and 2 outputs on the back. And it has 4 jacks on the front and 8 jacks on the front, 4 knobs and 8 touch pads, as well as this circular combination of different connections. So basically what you get when you touch it is something like this. Your results may vary. I had no way of knowing what it was going to do for reasons that I'm about to explain. Okay, what this really is, it is a multi-purpose conductive touch plate instrument. It does a number of different things operated by touch plates, and it is a weirdly expressive instrument, even perhaps a non-traditional sort of instrument, but definitely an instrument. What it is, it's a stereo audio processor, a CV processor, a touch synthesizer, and a controller. And I remember when Eric described it to me in a way similar to that, and I was like, wait, how can it be all of those things? So it has inputs, but it's a sound generating thing on its own, it was very confusing. But as you can see, when you touch it, things happen. Where are those sounds coming from? Well, it's a giant open circuit. It's actually 2 open circuits. And when you touch the touch plates, you are making connections between different parts of the circuit. And in doing so, you are generating different outcomes because of where these metal touch plates come into contact with the circuit. So basically, you are doing a weird modular thing where you're connecting different points of the circuit with your fingers, with the way that your fingers conduct energy through the touch plates, the capacitance also of your hands and your fingers, the moisture on your fingers, the moisture in the air, all of these things play a role in the sounds you create. And because those things can vary so greatly, the outcome is unpredictable. You don't know what your connection is actually going to do or entirely what connections you're going to make. Or what those connections are going to do even while you're holding them, because changes occur. And I don't know why those changes are occurring. Perhaps changes in the conductivity of my fingers, what my finger pads are doing, what's happening in the air, sunspots. I'm not sure. But certainly things change. And you might be listening to that and going, well, it is kind of aggressive and kind of violent and full of pops and bursts and static and squealing and hums and buzzes. And all of that is true. But I have to tell you, the more you work with it, and under certain circumstances that you can't predict or design, sometimes you'll get haunting, moaning sounds, like vocal sounds, beautiful rhythmic patterns that emerge out of nothing. Basically, what this is like for me, I used to drive across Washington State at night, and I loved listening to AM radio because between the stations, especially at night and on the plain that exists in the middle of Washington State, you'd get all these weird intersections of radio signals that would generate really weird sounds, really beautiful sounds. And I always wanted to somehow record them and implement that weird, haunting, ghostly bursts of static, lost radio stations sort of sound. And that's what this thing does as a matter of course. It's just how it operates. It's what it does. By touching these plates, you are connecting circuits and generating feedback. So that at least tells us probably where the oscillator sounds are coming from, because oscillations can be essentially feedback. I don't know if there are filters in here, although it is suggested that filtering effects do occur. There's frequency modulation that happens. There's static that happens. Apparently, there's even wave folding that happens, depending on where you put your fingers down. I don't know where some of those sounds are coming from. Some of those sounds I've never heard this thing make, even right now recording it, having been using it for these many months. It's very strange and magical. Multiple connections obviously are going to be more complex. But if you start at the bottom, you're going to get really mild sorts of things, filtering, amplitude changes. And then as you move towards the top, you get into more like frequency modulation, the introduction of noise, and apparently wavefolding. Matt Berry asked me if you can play Three Blind Mice on it, and I'm going to tell you right now that if you can, you're better than me. I've tried and tried, but yeah. There's kind of some ring modulation sort of sounds that happen. So I don't know what Eric put in here, but it's amazing. So right and left are two separate circuits. So as I touch the things that are in the middle, these two different circuits are interacting. And that adds another layer of complexity to the whole situation. Oh, and I did say that capacitance plays a role. So let's experience that. It actually generates a field upward from it that you can interact with. Here, we just have to turn it way up here. Oh, I almost had Three Blind Mice. But yeah, so you can see it's doing its own thing. Right now, the air in the room is playing the thing. It's magical. It does pick up interference from devices that create interference. I think it even picks up radio signals at times, but I've never specifically heard a radio signal. I just heard really weird bursts and when nothing's happening. So yeah, it's basically haunted, I think. Okay, so you're probably asking me, hey, Mark, enough hand waving. What do the jacks, knobs, and touchpads do? So you have two inputs, two 1/4-inch inputs on the back. And what these two knobs do is they act as the input volume for those two inputs on the back and all of these inputs over on the top. Over on the top. Mark, what are you? Anyway, these two knobs basically operate the input for the channels, the two channels. There's the left channel, which would be like the left input on the back, these left inputs, and then the right, which would control, obviously, the same. So as you turn these things up, you're going to get more of what you're plugging in. The inputs up here, these four jacks here are the inputs. These two go into the left side and these two go into the right side. And then, as you can probably imagine, these two jacks are outputs. So what is coming out of this will come out of these jacks. And so you'll notice that there are touchpads that have lines that go to the jacks. And that's your way of connecting the inputs that are here to various places on the two rings, which when you plug cables into the inputs, there's normaling that happens where these two channels intermingle without anything plugged in, like we were hearing before. But the minute you start plugging things in here, it separates these two into individual stereo processors. So then you have two inputs for each side and two outputs and two inputs in the back as well. So that is basically what's happening. And what you'll be able to see is, like, for example, I'm going to release a video where I plugged a drum machine, well, a drum pattern into the device, and I'm affecting it in various ways using cabling. I'm also going to demonstrate in coming videos more sounds just having it unpatched and some sounds having it patched. So what's cool about this is you might think, okay, so I need to put, external stuff, plug it in here, and then take that out and plug it into things, which you definitely can do. I'm going to show you in a coming up video how to do that with like control voltages and audio output from a modular synthesizer. But you can also do things like this. Let's just plug this input into this output. Now, we weren't getting anything like that before. Now we are. And touching the pad that's associated with that input will have an effect. And sometimes it'll have an effect just having the cable there. So you can mix and match, plugging various inputs to outputs. There's a nice square wave. And you can even do weird things. It doesn't say this anywhere, but I found that plugging inputs into inputs makes a difference. You get new sounds. When I did some research and found out what the inputs and outputs were for, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been plugging inputs to inputs. But it actually, in some cases, will generate new outcomes. So anyway, that is essentially how the inputs and outputs work, and the input volumes and the output volumes work. What you do with these jacks, it's nothing so straightforward as you plug things in and then take your outputs and do things with that. I mean, you can, in some of these videos, you'll see me just actually patching itself to itself to get different outcomes. In the drumming video, which you'll see, that's what I did. I basically plugged various cables into these patches, irrespective of whether they were input or output, until the drums sounded the way I wanted them to. It's magical. It's, like I said, it's intuitive more than it is logical. And that makes it a really interesting device for people who are looking for something along those lines. And it's also really creative and exploratory, explorative. I'm just going to make up words. See what it does to you? It muddles your mind. Anyway. But you will, as I did, spend hours working with it, and you'll find places where it does something absolutely amazing. Now, I'll warn you, it may do that only one time in your entire ownership of the device. So make sure to have a recording device going whenever you play with it. Record everything you do, because I guarantee there's going to be something that happens for a minute that you're like, that's the coolest sound in the world. And then you'll want to sample that. And if you're not recording it, you won't be able to. So that's my advice to you. First of all, if you want to explore sound, like intuitive, exploratory sound design, this is what you need. And I guarantee you will create things either in real time or things that you could sample that will serve a variety of musical needs. It's really magical. I can't stop using the thing. Okay, so there's a whole bunch more videos coming up where I just sort of make sounds for a while, and with patching and without patching. There's a video coming up where I do the drum thing, where you'll hear a drum pattern. There's a video where I'm going to demonstrate just messing with a modular synthesizer, processing some CV, processing some audio. And then there's a musical piece that I'm going to run through it. So keep an eye out for those videos and keep watching. Thank you.